All right, well, good morning, everybody. I'm Sam Albrecht, the Director of the Office of Regulatory Oversight. We're here to talk about the new tiny home program in Colorado, which is not really new. We've been working on it for over a year. My co-host is Tracy Baker. Tracy, wave hi, say hi. And I've got a couple of staff people here too. We are going to record this, so people that can't make it, we will allow them to view this, and we'll hang this up on the website along with the slide deck also. I've got an hour planned for this session. We're getting some really good attendance and a lot of new faces, and I appreciate that. What we will not do is go around and allow everybody to introduce themselves. I think that'll take way too long, but I'm planning to spend about 30 or 40 minutes on slides, and then the remaining hour on 20 minutes out of the hour, 30 minutes on questions you guys may have. That doesn't mean you can't ask questions as we go along, and would be happy to answer those as we go. I may defer to since we do only have an hour and I do have a lot of information to provide. I want to get through this slide deck because I think some of the answers will be followed on some of the slides a little later on. Tracy, do you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Well, I'm just happy to support everybody here. Obviously, we're kind of, those of you guys that I've talked to over the last month, especially since I've seen, a lot of you guys at the festivals and have had lots of conversations with many of you guys. It's just kind of, it's grind time, right? It's about going through the processes and kind of figuring it out. And as I've told everybody, hopefully I'm kind of encouraging everybody to give the state feedback as well, Sam, whether it be Donnie, whether it be, Christine, whether it be you. I'm encouraging as we go through this process, right? Because we just filled out our paperwork, the paperwork's the easy part, right? Like there's still processes, right? We had to reach out for our bond. There's still things that you have to go through. So I'm hoping that it's going to go smooth. We're guinea pigs a little bit, right? I mean, we're going through it for the first time ourselves, just like the state is. So I'm encouraging everybody just to continuously give good feedback, because the only way that we make it all better for everybody is if we all work together and make it better for everybody. Absolutely.
Thank you, Tracy. And it has been a process since the legislation was passed, and pulling the team together for the administrative rules. And I remember some of those early meetings on where we just focused on tiny homes, and they were very informative to me because I was fairly new to the position also. I do want to introduce the staff I do have here online. One is Donnie Featherman. He's the program manager for building codes and standards. He's your go-to guy on the codes and staffing issues and processes. And then Amelia Spinner is our lead administrator for building codes and standards. And then I haven't seen Christina. Did Christina pop in?
I've been in, Sam.
Hey, Christina. Christina Wilkes is our tiny home program coordinator. She is your dedicated resource for all things tiny homes. And I'll pop up that resource list at the end of this. And Christina, you may want to pop your email into the chat so people have that. Amelia and Donnie, feel free to do that also. But let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. Did we get any other staff pop in? I don't know if, who else do we have, Amelia? Sorry, you're muted.
Not staff, but we had more attendees.
Oh yeah, good. All right, so we have other staff in building codes and standards that are dedicated to factory built structures, residential, non-residential, also to installation. And then we have inspectors and plan reviewers also. So we've got a full complement of staff. We're happy to be fully staffed right now, although we've got some upcoming positions that we're going to open. So let me share my screen. All right, when I share my screen, I lose my view of the participants. I'll keep track of what's going on in the chat. If there's questions, that's the best place to put it. I think there's also the feature for putting your hand up. And Donnie and Amelia, you guys help me if somebody puts their hands up and I don't see it, so we can stop and take those questions. And so let me get a shout out. Can you guys see that screen? The slide deck?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, let me just figure out how to advance it. All right, so real quick, we're going to take a look at the I've done the welcome, the introduction, the overview of the session. We're going to talk a little bit about the process for tiny homes and go back and take a look also at the how we got here today. And this is focused again for the tiny home manufacturers, and then we'll have a wrap up. All right, so we are recording this and then we will post this to the website. Just some ground rules that we developed when we started putting these things together, these rules together. We can't change the statute. You can tell us if you don't like the statute, that's fine, but we're not going to be able to make any statutory changes. That's not part of this process. We can't change the approved rules at this point in time. We can also always go into a future rulemaking. It's not taken lightly when we go into a future rulemaking because it is a 9-month process to change any of the rules. We always have the option to make changes to the to do emergency changes if we find something that's really broken. But hopefully we have pre-thought this enough to make sure that we don't have any emergency rules that are needed. We're only addressing tiny homes as defined by Colorado statute. We're not talking about RV models. We're not talking about park models, tiny homes without wheels, tiny homes with wheels. We're only looking at the Colorado statute and the rules that we have in the factory built program for Colorado. Does that make sense to everybody? Good. So let's talk real briefly about how we got here today. Our controlling statute is 2432-3301 through 2432-3329. You can look that up online. We have links on our website to it also. Basically, you just have to Google Colorado Revised Statutes, go into LexisNexis, click OK a couple times, and then you can find the chapter title and verse for what you need. The tiny home bill, HB 22-1242, that was introduced was actually is the genesis for getting us here today. This was a bill that was introduced in the Colorado House in 22. And it was tweaked along the way and approved and signed by the governor and became law. Once a bill is signed and becomes law, certain departments go into what we call administrative rulemaking. And that's where we come up with the definitions, further definitions, policies, procedures, and clarification of the bill and of the statute, because once that tiny home bill was signed, it became part of statute. And I'll hit some highlights on that because I think they are extremely important to this process. And then we'll also talk very briefly about that Colorado definition of a tiny home. So when we go into rulemaking, we use what is called a technical advisory committee. These are volunteers from industry and the community that help us implement rules, because legislators in their best interest do what they can to give us direction to go forward. we at the Division of Housing and Building Codes and Standards, as a part of the Department of Local Affairs, want to make sure that we get the rules right, okay? So we have 15 members on the TAC, Technical Advisory Committee. And we actually, I think you can see from this list, it's a fairly broad representation of industry. We have an architecture rep, a structural engineer, 3 people from building code and enforcement. These are local county and city guys, a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer rep, a plumbing industry rep, because the state has has a department in the Department of Regulatory Agencies for electrical and plumbing. And then we have 1 from the construction designer or producer industry, 2 from manufactured housing, 1 from energy conservation, 1 from organized labor. And this bill, HB 22-1242, added 2 from the tiny home industry. 1 is Tracy, who's with me today, and the other is Margarita Gonzalez, I think is, and she is with a firm that designs and consults to tiny home. Let me go back to that, because I didn't talk about the process for the Technical Advisory Committee. We started meeting in November or December, and we ran all the way through May, I think, on meetings. We had 1 or 2 meetings a week, and the meetings were generally from 2 to 3 hours, sometimes as long as 4, where we went through every single part of not only the tiny home bill, but every rule for factory built structures, residential structures, non-residential structures, commercial structures, tiny homes. We also, although we don't have any HUD code federal manufactured housing plants in Colorado, we are also the state approving authority for that, state appointed authority. So we have some overlap with HUD hubs coming into the state to make sure that they are installed correctly. Tracy, you want to talk anything about the how much fun and joy we had at the TAC meetings? Okay. Can everybody still hear me okay?
Yeah, she was on mute.
Okay, great. So the TAC meetings, I will also say, were open to the public. And we did have, especially at the front end of this, when we focused on tiny homes, tiny home industry folks that listened in and gave their advice, also on the rules as we were building them. And some of those stuck around through the entire end of that. So I think we had a really pretty good representation from industry and the community and all the stakeholder groups in developing the revision to our rules to incorporate tiny homes, along with a couple other things the legislators asked us to roll in. So let's talk a little bit about the definition of a tiny home in Colorado. It's fairly clear, and it's interesting that statute gave us not only the definition of a tiny home, but it also gave us what not to include as a tiny home. So a tiny home, per Colorado, is permanently constructed on a vehicle chassis, is designed for long-term residency, includes electrical, mechanical, or plumbing services that are fabricated, formed, or assembled at a location other than the site of the completed home, is not self-propelled, has a square footage of not more than 400 square feet. Per statute, a tiny home does not include a manufactured home, a recreational park trailer, a recreational vehicle, a semi-trailer, an intermodal shipping container. Now, we would, although we allow intermodal shipping containers to be used as part of our modular program, if it was under 400 square feet and not on a permanent vehicle chassis, it would be considered a modular construction. And our building codes allow for the intermodal shipping container to actually be used as the shell of the construction for some type of modular units. So once we had the definition and we started looking at a lot of different information, what we then did is, there's a couple other things I wanted to mention on those rules. In those rules, in that HB 22-1242, there were very specific line items in that law that are now part of statute for us to consider in developing the rules and managing the tiny home program. The first was keeping tiny homes affordable. That was in the rules. We were supposed to keep in mind the unique characteristics of tiny homes, such as size constraints and construction on the chassis, so that they can be moved around. Many tiny homes are built by shops producing fewer than 20 units per year. Many tiny homes are custom built rather than mass produced. And many tiny homes are built by their owners rather than by commercial shops. So with that said, we did our best to take into those considerations when we were looking at developing the rules around implementing a tiny home manufacturer, registered seller, installation process. All right, before I do this, I'm going to pop out a screen share real quick and just see if there are any questions for anybody before we jump into what the process is going to be in Colorado to build a tiny home designed for long-term occupancy within the state. Anybody want to throw something in the chat? There we go. A question on chassis. Vehicle chassis is defined in the rules. There's a whole, I think the whole rule 1 is definitions. A vehicle chassis is defined that it has to have a VIN number and a gross vehicle, a GVWR, gross vehicle weight rating. That's what we define as the chassis. David, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
No, HB 22-1242 does not say anything about legal parking. That's still left up to the county. So, and if it's not, and then Jerry, you had a question about if it's not an RV like our usual builds, how is it titled and taxed? We assume it's going to be titled and taxed very similar to how a manufactured home is. If it's set on a permanent or temporary foundation and has the right building permits from the local jurisdiction. So let me clarify a couple of things that I've learned and I've worked through with some of the different communities. We partner very closely with our local jurisdictions on building codes and standards. We just cover the construction of the factory built structure, in this case, a tiny home, right? If you want to place it someplace, you've got to get a permit from the local jurisdiction for long-term occupancy. Now, the way that relationship works is they have to accept the building codes that we have adopted at the state. There'll be an insignia on every tiny home that goes through the program that says what building codes it was built to, that it's been certified, that we've done the roof inspections as well as the final inspections on that unit, but you still have to have a permit from the a zoning permit from the local jurisdictions on where that unit is going to be placed. Does that make sense?
It does, sir. Thank you.
Good. All right, any other questions on how we got to where we are with respect to the laws, the rules and all that? Okay. So let me jump into the process. This is the meat and potatoes and gravy and the whole enchilada, right? On what the process is for Colorado. The first and Tracy talked a little bit about this too. Tracy, at the end of this slide, I'm going to kind of let you have a couple minutes to talk about how you're going to work your program, knowing that everybody has a different program. You have to register as a manufacturer. Okay, you have to fill out the application. You have to have a quality assurance manual. If you're out of state, you have to use a third-party agency for your inspections. And then you will have an insignia once that unit is completed that says that it's been built to the local codes, to the state codes. And I'll talk about what those codes are in just a second. If you are selling directly to the consumer, which I think most tiny home manufacturers do, you also have to have a seller registration. And the way that works is you have to have set aside so much money for if you get deposits and fail to deliver, the state will say, yeah, we need to call your bond or call your letters, your certificate of deposit or your letter of credit if you fail to deliver and you've taken a deposit. That does not mean you have to set aside the entire deposit. If you're using that money for your construction build, it just has to be clearly delineated on what was deposit and what was being used for construction, which is, again, is that consideration of the smaller manufacturer that has to use that money to buy the materials to build the unit and deliver. It's the same program we have for our manufactured housing and our modular people. If they sell direct to the consumer, they also have to be a registered seller. But as you drive up and down I-25, you see these manufactured housing lots with homes where people can go in and buy. They have to be registered sellers in order to do that. Once you attach it to land, it becomes a little different. You have to use a licensed realtor, but we're not going to have time to go into those requirements here today. The installer registration, the state of Colorado also does an installation. If your unit is going to be installed and get a CO or certificate of occupancy from a local jurisdiction, they're going to say, how do we know it was built to the codes? Our installation insignia does that. We will use our inspectors or third-party inspectors to go out and do those inspections for that installation to make sure everything was plugged in right. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. You may not, as tiny home manufacturers, be doing any installations, but if you are, you will also need to do the installer registration. Homeowners, we also have a clause in our rules that says homeowners can do their own installation, but they've got to follow our rules on that installation process in order to get that insignia. The plan review piece of that, that gets a little complicated too. We are going to need construction drawings to make sure that when we do our inspections, that it is built to a specific set of building codes. The state of Colorado also allows some variation for local conditions in the plan design. We have a lot of varying altitudes here, right? Wind load and snow loads are different in different jurisdictions. That plan and that initial insignia will have an address on what we will check on as far as the construction drawings. Now, we talked a lot about in the TAC about, well, what if somebody just wants to move it from place to place from month to month? Then it's being used more as an RV than it is as a long-term occupancy. Probably not getting a CO. I know that the industry's talked about trying to build to the maximum case on wind load and snow load and local conditions. That's up to you guys. If you want to build to exceed, say you want to, the address is in Elbert, but you're using a much, Elbert County, but you're using a much higher wind and snow load, that's okay. Because that owner says he may move it to the Vail Valley at some point in the future, whatever. But we'll get that figured out. On-site construction, I don't think that's going to affect you guys very much. And then again, I already talked a little bit about the inspections during construction, unit certification, installation, and local inspections. If there are any, if you're going to put a tiny home in a tiny home village and build a carport or a garage, that's going to be, that carport and garage is going to be under the local jurisdiction requirements, not us. We're only looking at the complete unit or what makes the unit complete for our inspections and our insignias. Tracy, you want to touch base on any of this process stuff?
I wish there was like a, simple answer, Sam, that it's, that it's going to be easy. I kind of already prepared everybody. I'm not saying it's going to be impossible, because we hopefully, did a good job with the program to make it work. But I still feel like we're going to have, a lot of learning to happen over the next few months. And I say that because even with some of mine and Austin's and our company's current builds, even though I have, certain situations that doesn't really require the need for the Colorado certification for some of these units we have coming up, we tried to design them and we want to build them as if, just because there's, it's a particular situation where a customer may change their mind on what they want to use it for later. And I know that. She might be starting out with, a studio per se, but I know that if she ever turns it into an RV or a tiny home, there's going to be certain requirements that need to be done in her framing, especially with her being at 8,000 elevation, right? So we're kind of taking that approach. But as far as like how certain customers are going to end up being taxed, how certain customers are going to end up placing it, certain things like that, I'm going to be going to the state just as much as everybody else is. So when I said earlier that we all need to kind of give that feedback right to the program, whether it be Donnie, like I'm getting ready to reach out to Donnie because I really had this house that I know a lot of us have, kind of designed similar, right? It's a gable roof and you're on wheels and you have, requirements with the snow load and also, increasing the insulation value for the roofs. Egress window is a nightmare right now for that house. And like, I want to show the state, hey, I want to show all of you guys, hey, listen, look at this house. Show me how to solve. I know how I'm going to solve the problem. But I don't want to have to, for a whole year, Sam, right? We're not gonna be able to change anything. I mean, that's really what it is. I heard you saying unless there's emergency. Well, I have a way to solve the problem, right? But it's not ideal for long-term solution. And so I'm going to go to the state and I'm going to talk to the team. And I think that you builders, everybody else, all of us are going to go through that as well. I don't think it's just going to be me that's, participating in this program and trying to certify our houses. We might be making it a little bit harder on ourselves because we are approaching a dual certification. We have customers that are going into an RV park and they want to, it's built to a park model status, right? 119.5 ANSI. But I know she's probably going to be moving out of state at some point. But what if she stays in Colorado? What if she decides to buy land here in Colorado? That changes things for us. For her particular house, Sam, no problem. Why? There's no lofts. She's got, multiple doors in the house, multiple egress, no problem with her breaker panel. With tinier houses, the little 24 footers, you don't have any walls for breaker panels. Those are hard. That's hard, right? And those are some of the pains, and getting an egress window up there, right? That's hard when you have, it's math, and we kind of talked about this. So it's taking a lot more thinking in our design to try to meet dual certification. So that's why I'm saying it's not easy, but we're figuring it out. And I think it's just going to take the builders the same process. And you guys are going to have to go, you know, to Donnie and to Christina and to Sam and whoever else, just as much as we are probably. But at the same time, you know, we're always going to try to support everybody in the process. We don't ever hide information. We always try to share. At least that's what we do at Tiny Building Experts. We try to do that and show a lot of love to our builders. I posted all of your resources that you sent out, Sam, on our page and it'll be on our website. We want everybody to you know, go through the process with us, with the state, help us make it better for everybody as well. But I think it's going to be a learning process.
Tracy, I think you're exactly right. And we always talked about doing the best we could to get through the rulemaking. And in the back of my mind, and I've said this out loud several times, I'm not opposed to another set of rulemaking if we need to tweak some stuff to go into effect next July, or to do an emergency rule if we need to do something like that. So just keep that in mind. There were a couple other really good questions in the chat. Yes, the data plate will have the wind and snow loads. And yes, remote inspections are going to be allowed for compliance. Donnie and I are working on that a little bit right now. We'll be reaching out to some of the inspection companies, third-party agencies that do that currently to see how they do it, so we can fine-tune our internal process, but that is going to be allowed. And yes, the landing of the loft can be a place for the secondary means of egress. We talked about that early in the process, and I know, Tracy, you said it's still difficult. So let's just try to figure that out.
It's due to framing. It's because of framing and the way you want to tie your framing in is why it's difficult. And Robin, I'll send you this design. Trust me, I'm going to send this design to everybody. All of you guys help me figure this out, because a lot of us use a gable roof, and on the smaller houses, if you're, you know, it's rough. We can meet it for RV and ANSI, but that 5 square foot opening for residential is hard. So, and I don't want to just push it to the roof with an egress skylight. I don't want that just to be an only option, right?
Right. Yeah,
Or
that's always the other option too. All right,
I know.
cool. Tracy, thank you for that. It is like Tracy just validated everything we said, and we listened to everything the industry said along the way. But now, as we start actually building these things, we know that there's going to be some improvements to our processes and our rules that we need. So you guys, I'm always open to get feedback. Maybe we, for this first year, continue to kind of take a look at, maybe we do this tiny home community meeting once a quarter or so, Tracy, just to start getting feedback and start making a list of things that we need to consider. And I'm open to that too.
Hey, Sam, can you hear me?
Yeah, Donnie, go ahead.
All right, I'm not sure what's wrong with my mic. I called you probably like 20 minutes ago, but the mic wasn't working. Lance actually had a question about his types of products that I believe he said that the floor structure, the way the structure is designed, it doesn't need to have a chassis. Can you kind of go a little deeper into that?
Say that again, Donnie. I didn't quite understand. There's a problem with the.
Lance had a question about his product up above. In the,
Oh yeah.
I was wondering if he could go a little deeper into that, his question.
Well, I mean, the statute's pretty clear that for it to be defined as a tiny home, it has to have, it has to be permanently attached as a chassis, and we clarified that to be a made for purpose, built for purpose trailer. We would look at alternative attachments to that. What you might have, Lance, there is also a tiny home. If you're planning a tiny house, if you're building to the same building codes that we're going to talk about in just a second, and it's not attached to a permanent chassis, not permanently attached to a vehicle chassis, it would probably qualify as a tiny house.
Yeah, it would fall under Appendix Q, wouldn't it, Sam,
Yeah.
normally?
Yep, it's going to fall under Appendix Q, and I think we're going to jump into that here in just a second. In fact, here are the codes right now. So these are the codes that the state approved. Donnie, did I answer that? Lance and Donnie, did I answer that question?
Well, kind of in a sense, we can certainly build a 119.5 and we can put those on a chassis, which we do as well. But our floor is strong enough; it's self-supporting. And so while we are going through the process for residential construction in about 9 states, and expect to have all of those done within the next 3 to 4 months, so residential building code as well. But for the tiny home community, from a cost advantage aspect of it, it's just simpler because we're meeting the code just to be able to put it on a permanent foundation. And so and not have the expense of a chassis, because our floor is adequately strong enough to be used without it. So what I'm trying not to do is have our product beat every state's building code. What we're really trying to do is something similar to what ASTM is trying to do, is create a code that's very similar to what the manufactured housing industry has, which is where I originally came from, because then we can cross states easily and cost effectively by building a code compliant product that works in every state.
Yep, and that would be ideal too, as we start to see ASTM and roll out some of those new standards. We're willing to take a look at that. We're not stuck on the ones that we have over here. So when we started this process over about a year ago, they weren't quite ready yet. And so Lance, what you need to do is get with Donnie and our engineer and talk a little bit, send us some sample construction drawings, and we can take a look at that and have get you some feedback.
That would be great, because so far we're meeting all the categories for California, Arizona, Nevada. We're going through the process, and it's working very well. We're meeting and exceeding all the energy codes as well. So once again, if we're going to serve the masses with low cost, high quality product, we just need to find a simpler solution than the typical state by state code approvals that we're kind of locked in right now, as most of us are.
Right. Okay. I hear you. All right. So here's, let me share my screen now on the building codes that we have that we're looking at. And so we are using the one that is most applicable here is IRC 2018. Again, all our codes are 2018 except for the IECC, which is 2015. And we have amended every single code, so you have to take a look at IRC 2018 as amended, and 2018 has Appendix Q. The other thing that we did is we took 99.9% of Appendix AQ out of 2021 IRC and moved it over to 2018 Appendix Q. So if you're familiar with using the Appendix AQ in 2021 IRC, it's gonna look very familiar when you look at our code, our administrative rules, and all those amended codes are in our administrative rules. I threw that last one down there also. The administrative tool 215 allows modification or alternatives of equivalent. Must be requested in writing with backup information. And again, I've mentioned that we would look at alternative code standards in the future. All right, I'm seeing more messages pop up. Well, Robert, you're getting pretty technical on me. We'll have to take a look at that question. Can you guys see my screen right now or not?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. Appendix Q is a reference standard, not part of the building codes. It has to be accepted by the adopting authority. We have adopted Appendix Q, so it as amended. So it's part of what the tiny home community can use as the building code standard. All right, the next slide. We talked to this a little bit too. Again, you've got to design to the local wind and snow load, design temps. That's more with respect to furnaces. And I realize most of tiny homes are using electric heat. Fire suppression, if required, is a local requirement in the state of Colorado. And then wildfire risk. If a local jurisdiction has adopted a WUI, Wildland Urban Interface Code, or some type of building standards to reduce wildfire risk, then those have to be adopted. So, but the part where the state comes into play is only with respect to the construction materials, and of course, probably the separation distance, if you're putting it, will come in more in the local stuff, and your turnarounds for firefighting equipment, all that will be up to the local jurisdictions and not us. But we've had some bad wildfires. We've had them run through some communities where we've lost hundreds and hundreds of homes. And so we're starting to see more wildfire risk building standards put into place. So just be aware of that. So when you talk to your buyers and say, they may not be able to give you an address, but if they want a long-term occupancy, they may have to figure out, and you guys are going to have to be very clear with them on what you're building it to with respect to these local design standards, and what it, and just, I would share with them, moving it into a fire area with a fire suppression requirement or a wildfire risk requirement. They need to design for that up front.
Sam, Tracy has a question regarding the foundation in the chat.
Okay, Tracy,
Nope.
I can hear you.
I don't have a question. I think I was trying to respond to one of the questions in the chat, or one of the
Okay.
questions that was being posed, which was when you're not building on wheels, then in Colorado, it falls under foundation.
It falls under a permanent foundation if you want that long-term, that CO. So yeah, it would have to meet our requirements for a permanent foundation if it's not on a chassis. Thank you,
Yep.
Tracy.
Yep, no worries.
All right, so just a couple other things. Here's some of the ways we amended that Appendix Q. We also, well, I mentioned that we basically used the Appendix AQ out of 2021 IRC. It allows for the, we amended the 2015 IECC values to allow R30 in the ceiling versus the R40 requirement. Allows for pedestal connection for electrical and plumbing, which was an industry request, and also allows for loft egress from the loft landing, which was an industry request. And then we defined built for purpose chassis, including VIN and GVWR, or engineered drawings for any modified vehicle, trailer, and VIN and GVWR. So if you have a local guy that is building his own on an old trailer, he's going to have to provide engineered drawings and get a VIN and a gross vehicle weight rating from Highway Patrol here in the state before we will approve his construction drawings. Allows use for the kitchen sink if not enough room for a bathroom sink, and that was an industry request also. So that is also, and that actually came up at the State Housing Board when we talked about it. So, but then they understood the space restrictions, and I know a lot of you guys are being able to find configurations that do both. That's fine, but if you need to not have a kitchen sink, bathroom sink, you can, as long as you have a kitchen sink, we're okay. Again, these are going to get the same inspections as modular homes. You're going to get a certification insignia It's actually magenta, pink. We couldn't quite, that was about the only color we had left on the color palette wheel with all our other insignias. Then an installation inspection with a copper insignia, like every other manufactured home or modular home. So here's where we think every tiny home should have an installation manual, and Tracy and I have talked a little bit about it. I think it should be in 3 parts. I think it should have 3 sections. Here's your installation, because the consumer is going to say installation. Oh, how do I plug it into an RV park? That should be a section. You may want to also include a section on how it goes on a temporary foundation and how it is going to be attached to a permanent foundation. And so with those 3, I think the industry is pretty well covered. If you don't provide an installation manual with your unit, you're going to have to use the Building Codes and Standards Manufactured Housing Installation Program Manual, which is under revision right now also to add in for tiny homes. But it is geared toward HUD and modular, and it's not really tiny home friendly at this point in time. If you guys want to send us installation manuals to take a look at, we'd be happy to take a look at that too and provide advice back to you.
Hey, Sam.
Yep.
So I kind of gave Austin one, Austin Baker at obviously Tiny Building Experts, but he gave me some feedback and it was exactly what you just described. He wanted to provide multiple levels of installation. And then also knowing that the local jurisdictions are going to have some say so as well, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of have a neat little layout. Like I said, he made some corrections to it, so I'll send it over to you. But obviously we don't mind sharing, right? So yeah.
Yep.
Hey, Sam.
Good. And then I mentioned in this last bullet OC items, that's on-site construction items. We used to call it AQ, alternative construction. These are things more geared toward the manufactured homes. If if it's a 2 or 3 box unit and shipped without trusses and the trusses come separately, that's necessary and to be inspected on site. There's some other items that are very common in the manufactured home industry for on-site construction. I assume that for the tiny home community, for your not going to have a lot or any OC, but that is part of the requirements that you tell us if any of it has to be completed on site. And then that has to be inspected before it gets your certified unit insignia.
Hey, Sam, Donnie's trying to talk again, I think. Donnie?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Hey, I was trying to speak on the installation manual. The intent of using our installation manual is when an installation manual is not available. And that's typically for like mobile homes, right? Where they're built prior to 1976. So it's probably harder to find an installation manual for them. And that's why we can use ours. The other thing is our installation manual is based on the HUD installation requirements. And so if the HUD installation manual is not available, you can use ours as well because it's the same standards. But typically for HUD, if you have a product and you time things out right, you can actually request an installation manual from HUD's archives. They have all the installation manuals that were ever created for all the HUD products. They keep them archived. But in the event that it's just taking too long and you need to get that structure installed, you can certainly use ours. But for the tiny homes, the intent is it's a new product. You're building a product that's specific to your design and should have its own installation manual. So pretty much every tiny home should have an installation manual. But later on down the road, when these homeowners, let's say they, decided they wanted to uplift their home, right, and move it somewhere else, and they can't find the installation manual, maybe the factory's not around anymore, then they can use our installation manual. But at least for the new products, I think everything that's being set now or going to be set in the near future should have an installation manual from the tiny home manufacturer.
Yep. And Lance, thanks, Donnie. And Lance, you had another question about panels. Let's take that offline and have a meeting with Donnie and and talk about what you're looking at. And Jerry, an install manual that will be accepted. Donnie, do we review the installation manuals as part of our requirements?
I think it has to be submitted.
So.
Yeah, we do ask for them to be submitted, I think.
Yeah, so for us, we don't have anything that's required for them, for a specific installation manual. But it should be,
I think we have to submit it with the plans, you guys.
Yeah, I think you're right.
If I recall correctly. And the answer to Lance's question is yes, you can use prescript, you can go performance-based. That's the whole ResNet thing that we passed by the installation values and the percentages, Sam. So the
Thanks,
short
Tracy.
answer to
Yep.
Lance's question is yes.
yeah, I don't recall anything requiring an installation manual to be submitted. Or, yeah, installation manual submitted with your plans,
With plans?
because we're just reviewing your plans. Installation is a whole different thing. We're reviewing the construction.
Or maybe
not-
it's submitted with the installation, Donnie.
Well, it doesn't have to be submitted. It just has to be there on site when we do our inspection,
Okay.
right? We don't require any submittal of installation manuals to us because we don't review them. What I do suggest though, is that you get it reviewed by a third party, and anything that's structural on that installation manual needs to be stamped. That's typical for any modular or HUD installation manuals. They have footing details of how to construct their footings for their foundation systems. Those are all stamped by engineers. I think there's most of the ones that I've looked at. The only thing that's not stamped by an engineer is like a perimeter wall foundation system, and that's just because it's specific to the site location. And even in the HUD manuals, it says to make sure that you get a local design or registered design professional to design that foundation system for you. Make sure that they're registered with the state and that the state allows that type of foundation system. So that's just, I'm just throwing that out there because all our foundation systems, permanent or temporary, require a engineer design. And so our engineer and I have discussed that quite in detail the past few days, if not weeks, about how we're going to do that, because you got to remember the new statute actually requires us to look at foundation systems in jurisdictions without building departments, right? And so how we're going to handle that. Anything that is engineered is going to, well, all the foundation systems have to be engineered regardless if it's permanent or temporary. But our statute also allows the installation manual to be used as a method of support for that structure when it comes to the foundation system. But it's still required to be engineer designed. So when you're developing these installation manuals, again, get a third party look at it, have an engineer look at it and sign off on that installation details, how to, set up the footings for that tiny home, how it needs to be attached, meeting the frost depth requirements for permanent foundation systems, and details like that. So I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, Donnie, thanks for that too. And guys, I know we're pushing up on the hour. We realize that there are legacy issues that we are going to have in front of us as we look at tiny homes, especially from the consumer side. I've added a couple FAQs on the website, a tiny home FAQ for consumers, one for manufacturers, and one for local jurisdictions. I think we're also going to see one. My other division is pulling one together, FAQ for tiny homes in mobile home parks or tiny home villages, how those are going to work. And so we're trying to get the education out there. Also, Tracy, you mentioned an education process. This is a very condensed version of a 6-hour presentation that Donnie and I gave to about 75 local jurisdiction folks and other state agency folks back a month or so ago. So we are trying to get the word out, and it was very well received. Donnie is actually going over to the West Slope next week and give that same presentation. I don't think it's 6 hours to some of the West Slope folks that couldn't make it over the hill to attend the 6-hour training. And that was sponsored by the Colorado chapter of the International Construction Codes, CCICC. Again, these are the resources. I'll make sure we get this on the website also. And all right, so that is pretty much the end of the formal presentation. I'm going to stop my screen share. And we'll take some comments, questions, thoughts. Aaron, you asked about a universally-ish accepted calculator performance standard. I would defer to Donnie on that. And we might make take a phone call.
Yeah, I think maybe a phone call would be best. Maybe we can set something up if other people are interested in that. But typically ResCheck, we use ResCheck, but the code allows you to use any software that has been approved for energy code compliance. And what those softwares are, I have to look it up again, but I think there's about 5 or 6 softwares that you can use, like RightSoft, or not RightSoft. What am I thinking of? I'm thinking of LoadCalcs. Let me look at it again, but I believe it still has the same language in there for ResCheck or your energy code compliance calculations.
All
That's
right,
what we
any-
used, Sam, when we did
Go
our
ahead.
testing. We used ResCheck.
Yep. And Tracy's been a great resource for the TAC. I mean, she has shared her ResCheck, she's shared her construction drawings, and she has always shared her concerns about making these tiny homes a great product for Colorado. Donnie, you have any idea on what the third parties might cost? There's actually a place on our website where you can find our registered installers. You might just want to take a look at that resource and reach out. And Tracy, have you looked at any
Yes.
costs?
Yeah,
for,
It's actually super easy, you guys. On your guys' website, Sam, you guys have the link. There's a list of a lot of installers as you start calling to figure out who's going to do the installation for you. Like when I looked out for like Durango, there's only a handful of installers per the area, and they don't want to go too far. So if you are going to have a customer that needs to install, you know, near Wyoming, look for an installer over there because somebody from Durango is not coming over here. So that is, and the other thing too is there's a lot of installers that are on there, Sam, that are not active. Right. So even
Yeah.
though there might have been like 7 for Colorado Springs, by the time I got through the list, I think I found like 3. So that information is super duper easy and readily available. And it doesn't seem to be too expensive. For those of you that are asking about the costs, Steve, it's really no more than delivery local with some additional costs for the install.
The other thing too to remember is homeowners are allowed to install their own products too. So if your installation manuals are pretty, you know, I always say break it down Barney style if it's easy to follow, right? And a homeowner can install their own product as well. Sometimes it causes little issues on our end because they're kind of learning as they're doing, but the law allows them to do it. So that's another alternative there. But just real quick, Jerry, he does have his hand up.
And
Yeah,
Jerry,
thanks. So,
I muted you.
My question is overall about just some support. Just where I'm coming from is California. A lot of cities have passed like a lot of rules and things and made things quote unquote legal. Then we had the customer go to the city and they're like shrugging their shoulders like, we don't know what that is, right? So basically my question is, this is a process. Obviously, it's gonna take a lot of work. It's gonna take a lot of gusto, right, to get through this, which is fine. None of that's a problem. But my question is when I have a customer that says, okay, I'm ready, right? Will we have the support from you guys to go to their local people who might say, well, I don't know, right? I don't know what to do. That say, no, this is legal. Here's how we do it. You know what I mean? Like, can we connect and make sure that they're going to be able to say, yes, customer, you can do this because it's the law. So I just want to ask the question about the support we might get from you guys when we have them talk to their local people. And, you know, they may or may not, right? This is, you know, normal, shrug their shoulders and say, I don't know, right?
Yeah. So Jerry, that's a good question. We have done our best to do outreach. my background is I am a county manager. I used to be a county manager. So I've dealt with some of this local jurisdiction and local building department stuff before.
Got it.
We actually have a really good chapter of CCICC where we actually can get the word out also. We have a list of all, and it changes every day, right? Of all the local jurisdictions, there's 320 of them. They've got chance to put input into the rules. They've got notification that the new rules are out. The tiny homes are now available for long-term occupant, to be built for long-term occupancy. And we spend a lot of time educating not only new building officials, but existing building officials on every aspect of factory built structures. Because a lot of the guys in the more remote parts of the state don't understand it, haven't seen it. And so we do that. I also have a outreach program that I'm working on to the Colorado Counties Incorporated, the Colorado Municipal League, as well as the Colorado City County Managers Association to let them know about all this. So if you get into a problem, if any of your buyers get into a problem with the local jurisdiction and they say, yeah, we don't allow tiny homes, they have to take a state product if they're zoned for it. If they're trying to get a building permit or in a place that doesn't allow, it only allows
Commercial or something, right?
yeah,
Okay.
Then that's going to be different. That's up to the local jurisdictions. We don't have authority on that.
Thank you,
Now-
sir. Appreciate that.
Yep. The other thing that we're seeing is a big movement toward alternative housing for disadvantaged communities, whether it's at-risk youth or youth transferring out of a program or out of foster care, veterans communities and homeless communities that are crossing the line between long-term occupancy type structures and emergency structures, right? Temporary housing structures. So we realize that is a changing environment. We're also seeing some tiny home villages pop up in Colorado. There's at least 2 or 3 that we're aware of. And if they are doing long-term rentals in a community and they're either leasing the unit or allowing somebody to put a unit in there and paying lot lease, those are going to be classified as mobile home parks, and that's different too, a whole different animal. But we're trying to work through all that. Does
Thanks,
that help?
Sam.
Sherry, does that help answer your question?
It does. It sounds like the outreach has obviously been very good, a lot better than what I've experienced, I believe, in other processes. So and it sounds like you guys have a lot of people like Christina, for instance, that can support, if I have a question as well. So I do appreciate that.
Yep. A question on, can they be put in as a primary resident vacant land? If that land is zoned for it, yes, they can be the primary resident. We can also, we've seen a big movement in the state recently on ADUs, accessory dwelling units. So these can also be ADUs if they allow, if it meets the size restrictions that the local jurisdictions have. Elbert County, where I was county manager, just approved ADU changes to their building codes about 3 years ago. So we're starting to see more of that too. Tracy, you got your hand up?
I do. So one of the things that I have been asked about, Sam, for other tiny housers or that already own a tiny house. We talked about this while we were on the TAC team and while we did all of this, but you have a couple of tiny housers that, are a little bit discouraged. Maybe they, had a house built from a builder, let's say maybe in Tennessee, that's not going to meet the R values that are going to be required here, and immediately their thoughts are, oh my gosh, I have to sell my tiny house. And, I don't want to say yes to that because I feel like you guys were supposed to have a program that allowed them to see if they can rectify any situations, right? Like, let's say somebody's missing something that can easily be fixed. Maybe not easily, but maybe a little bit costly, but maybe they're able to get it fixed versus having to sell a tiny house and go buy a new tiny house because they plan on living in Colorado. So there's supposed to be some sort of resources that you guys are offering to educate those folks. That is one of the things I would say at the 2 talks that we gave about the new rules and stuff that we were asked about, that we really didn't have any answers for. So I don't know if you guys could put some resources out there for those people that are worried about their houses not meeting the Colorado codes.
Perfect question, Tracy, and let me try to address that in a couple ways. One is take a look at our FAQs, and if you think there are additional questions that need to be in our FAQs, we're happy to change it. I made that up based on my limited, all those up and based on mine and my team's input on what we needed to address. Stuff coming in, and we did address this as an attack as far as about grandfathering. Is there a grandfathering clause in there? And the answer is no, not really, because once that unit is built and everything is framed up and closed up and finished, it's tough to see inside the walls if you're going into a local jurisdiction. The state will not be going back and trying to determine if that Tennessee home you talked about was built to 2018 IRC, right? If they have proof of that, the best thing they can do, and I've talked to some local jurisdictions about that, if they have proof that it was built to a certain code and they have to make some modifications, that's all going to be on the local jurisdiction. So they're going to have to work with that local jurisdiction to figure out where it's going, and is that local jurisdiction going to accept it in an as-built manner when it gets to that property, right? Or the modifications, just like we do on the manufactured homes and the modular homes, any modifications to a home, it does not fall under the state program. It falls under the local jurisdictions. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be
That's going to be really hard, Sam. Like, I don't want to answer that question. I don't want to tell somebody their house is not going to meet Colorado code.
And for long-term occupancy, we're going to find that with every tiny home that's built to RV standards, where people think that they can, and depending on the local jurisdiction, it may be, how long can you stay in an RV? 30, 60, 90, 180 days, right?
Max.
After that, it's tough. They're going to have to, the local jurisdictions control that CO and the local requirements on how long they can stay in a non-state approved home. And I don't know how other states are handling that.
Well, I mean, it's easy if you get, a tiny house built from a Colorado builder that, does a closed cell spray foam. They can go pretty much anywhere, but it's harder if you go out to a builder that, insulates at an R13 in their walls, or an R15 in their walls and tries to come to Colorado, right? They're never going to meet it.
Tracy, one thing I would say is, we are going to be the best resources for that because we're the ones that approve or disapprove something, right?
Yep.
So every scenario is going to be different, and it's hard to do a general, blanket answer for you on those.
Yeah, no worries. I think as long as you make the resources available, Donnie, that way people can get pointed in your guys' direction on that. That'll be awesome.
I think that's what I'm trying to tell you, though. We are the resource, so that they need to reach out to us, right? Because we provide one document, it's not going to cover everything, right? Every scenario is going to be different. We get as-built all the time. We've told factories multiple times they're not supposed to be doing as-built anymore, because what they do is they'll build it, ship it here, and say, hey, sorry, we missed your process. What do we need to do, right? And it's the same factory, right? We don't want to run into those situations. So the best resource is going to be us. And I suggest they reach out to myself. And if I'm not available, Sam, and we'll have those conversations with them. We have them all the time. We'll designate an hour or sometimes longer if it's needed to talk with them and walk them through that. Another resource that they could reach out to is a designer, right? Designer could go in there, engineer can go in there and look at their structure the way it's currently set up and say like, hey, this is what needs to be done. And then give them a cost, like, hey, this is how much it's going to cost. If it costs more to fix it, to bring it up to Colorado code, maybe it's easier for them just to sell it and then build new, right? But it's hard to say. There's,
Agreed.
but again, the resource is us, and I suggest they reach out to us. So if you get more questions like that, just have them reach out to me.
Yeah, this was at the tiny house festivals over the last few weekends. So we pretty much pointed them to your guys' website and reaching out to you guys. And we've listed your contact information, Donnie, as well as Christine's info as well. So yeah, we're gonna keep doing that.
Good, Tracy. Thank you. All right, guys. Well, we're 15 minutes over time. Any last thoughts or comments or final questions before we wrap this up? I hope you found this useful. Like I said, we're here. We're willing to listen. We're willing to work with every consumers as well as local governments as well as manufacturers. Anything else I can do for anybody today?
Sorry, Sam, real quick. Is there a specific permit they'll be getting for this specific product from the local jurisdiction, or is it the same as a residential, like a new home being built?
Yeah, it'll be the same as their residential permits.
Okay, same as residential. Okay, all right.
Yeah, there's not a statewide direction on how they permit homes, so it's up to the locals. And some locals don't even have COs. They call it something else. So it's going to be, like I said, 320 jurisdictions. So it's going to be interesting for people to navigate. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. If you have any further burning questions, you can email me and Donnie and Christina and Amelia. We'd be happy to help out. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.